still here live at JAMstack Conf in San Francisco, and I'm sitting here with Sean, is it Urquhart?
Urquhart, yeah.
Are you a React developer who builds large applications for your organization? With NX, you can build your apps in a monorepo alongside your backend code and share code between React and other frameworks. You'll also get advanced code generation and automatically configure tooling like Cypress, Jest, and Prettier to simplify your workload. You'll build higher quality apps, share more across teams, and focus less time on configuration. Visit nx.dev/React to get Narwhal's free open source set of extensible dev tools.
Why don't you just tell us a little about yourself?
Cool. Well, I work for Netlify. I run the Netlify CMS open source project. I've been in development for about 10 years, pretty much all front end. I've done a little bit of everything. I've done the big corporate stuff. I've done freelance. I've been with Netlify for about 2.5 years. Been leading the Netlify CMS project the whole time.
Right.
And so my focus has been the JAMstack and using Git-based content management to simplify the CMS story for JAMstack sites.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, it's actually interesting because I've talked to some of the sponsors here at JAMstack Conf, and some of the CMS vendors, they have a back end that's not Git, right?
Right, exactly.
It's a custom back end.
Yeah.
As I talked to them, I was like, you know what, I kind of need it on Git because, we're doing a Jamstack site for devchat.tv, and I want people to be able to submit pull requests and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it works really well for that, and it's kind of what I went over in my talk and it's a story that we really have to start telling a lot. Where a static site generator really already knows what it wants. It's already really opinionated, and so it wants to see Markdown file. And again, this isn't there's some like Gatsby and some in what's the other Nuxt, Gritsum that are pretty futuristic, and so they can take content from anywhere. And but generally, static site generators want to see Markdown and YAML files sitting in your repo, and so the idea was always that a developer can write those things, and they're happy to write them, and so you don't really need a content management system.
Right.
But at scale, you do. Everyone isn't going to write those things. Everyone doesn't know Git, and so you just have this little job where you need someone to be able to type things into a traditional CMS UI, and then out the other side, you get that Markdown and all that stuff in the file system, and then Git provides that bridge. You have your repo in GitHub, and you're able to just basically build blobs and trees and push commits.
Yeah, for our team, for example, we have 6 show notes writers and content manager. All of those people are not developers, right? And so I tried to get them to learn Markdown, and then I gave up on trying to get them to learn Markdown. I'm sure you've heard this story before, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, so I need something else, right? And we were on WordPress before, but managing WordPress was a headache, and I was the one that had to do it. So we hooked Netlify CMS up, and it worked pretty well. There are a few things I wish it did that it doesn't.
Sure.
But it's like, okay, just go in and,
It's interesting. It's still a pretty nascent space, and one of the interesting things about Git-based content management is that it makes a lot of old problems new again, problems that have long been solved. And I've heard people kind of gripe about this, and I can't say I disagree. For example, simple things like relations. I create an author in WordPress, and then I can assign that author to a post. Like you have a relational database sitting there. It's very simple, but when everything is in Git, it's not as simple. There are a lot of edge cases and a lot of weird things. There's how many requests do I need to make to get everything I need. So it's very doable, but again, it's a new problem. We don't have all the perfect solutions, and so people come in, they like the value proposition, and then they run into some things and they go, I'm gonna go back to WordPress, or I'm gonna use this headless CMS over there. So so it's still pretty new. It's got some growing pains.
Yep, I think the thing that I'm running into is something very similar to that, where we have podcast hosts. And so, I have a bunch of metadata for it. Same thing with the podcasts themselves, right? I've got, here's where the image is stored. Here's the title. Here's, all this other information about it. And Netlify CMS works really well for managing those Markdown files, but it doesn't really give me a good way of managing the data files.
Is it one Markdown file and one data file per episode?
No.
Oh, okay, so you have one data file with a bunch of metadata for different episodes?
No, the metadata goes into the Markdown file for the episode, but the podcast itself, the overarching show, all the metadata for that goes into its own file.
Okay, gotcha.
And so if I want to create a new show, it'd be nice if I could just go in and say, okay, create a new data file for it. Yeah.
You should be able to. If you send me some info, I'd be happy to help you.
Awesome.
We get that going. I found myself ending a lot of conversations that way with people here. We go through stuff and they say, well, I tried it, but I ran into this. I'm like, well, Send me your info.
Yeah.
I'll help you out. But that's really what it comes down to for me is I need to stay on top of implementing it over and over again so I can stay close to what people are actually experiencing. So.
Yeah. But I've been pretty impressed with just how robust it is.
Nice.
Because my team, they can put in whatever it is that we need for the show, and
right.
It goes in, and then of course I'm the nerd that goes in and edits the markdown directly.
Right. Yeah, CMS. Just edit the markdown. With Git-based content management, we had, I don't know if I should, this is being recorded, I'm going to say it anyway. When I first started Netlify, I wanted to make a blog post called Netlify CMS Sucks. And our co-founder, Chris, just didn't laugh, didn't think it was, I never brought it up again. But and of course I don't think it sucks, but my point was, we kept having all these people come in and say, oh, well, WordPress does this, oh, well, this does that. And it's like, if you don't value Git-based content management, if that's not the reason you're here, go use a different CMS.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the value proposition, and you're going to give up a few things for the sake of having that Git-based story that I went over in the talk. We have this tiny CMS, it lives on a CDN. I mean,
it's simple, it's clean, it's nice.
It's almost a non-entity in your stack. You could add Netlify CMS today and remove it tomorrow, and you'd never even know it was there. And that's kind of the beauty of it. And so we're as we go forward, we're working on the robustness and all that. But the Git base is the value. So if you value that, maybe it's worth it.
Yeah. And if I remember right, it actually connects to the GitHub API and
we have back-end registration where you can. So we have a GitHub back-end, a Bitbucket, GitLab. A lot of the community contributed to those. We have one of our Tony Alves, one of our longtime maintainers. He created a Firebase back-end.
Oh wow!
For Netlify CMS. I'm like, damn it, Tony, this is not what we're doing here. But it works though. It can. It's really just whatever API you want. And I think one day, ultimately, I don't talk about it because but down the road, it should be able to work with any kind of API.
Right.
That makes sense. But right now, we have to tell this Git story because it's hard for people to even wrap their heads around just that part of it. I was talking to the Forestry team about that earlier. Like, we have to get this Git-based content management story out, and once that's a thing that people are talking about, then we can look at, hey, Netlify CMS is actually a dashboard that can pretty much do anything. So right now, we just really want to empower
like Firebase.
Right? Sure, do it. So it's pretty interesting though, the possibilities. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. What's kind of the genesis of this? Was it your idea? Was it somebody else's idea and you built it? Or?
No, it was our Matt Billman, our CEO, who is responsible for so much. He actually wrote multiple content management systems.
Right.
He worked at an agency where they had, I can't remember the number, it's gotten into legend now, it's like 12,000 sites a year, but it was some crazy amount of volume they were doing, and he built this kind of in-house CMS for that, turned into a service called WebPop. I think he built another one at some point. So when he was starting Netlify, he created Netlify CMS in Ember and just kind of put it together. It did the job. But the whole point was, it was never about making a play to have this CMS that's the best CMS.
Right.
It was always about, hey, look, Git-based content management is a thing, and it can be done in a way that's open source. So that, because when people come onto the JAMstack, invariably one of the first questions they ask is, well, what do I do about content management?
Right.
So we wanted to have an easy open source answer for that was supported, and so we provided that, and we've continued to support it. It's always been myself and one other guy since early 2017 when I came on board. And that's kind of been it. So just enough investment it's a solid investment, but it's enough to just kind of keep things moving and keep momentum and be able to support the community. We have a great community. I think we're up to well over 200 contributors to the repo so far, and a whole lot of downloads. So it's gotten a lot of traction. So
nice. So I guess the other thing that I'm wondering about is, you said that it was originally built in Ember, or a version of it was built in Ember.
It was originally in Ember, and because of the atomic deploys on Netlify, that version you can still load it. We have a link somewhere, you can pull it up.
Right.
But we ended up moving over to React right before I got there. I think it was Brian Douglas who used to work with us.
Somebody else's pain. We've had Brian on the show before.
Yeah. Everybody loves B. Dougie, and he was the one I believe that actually took the thing and pulled it from Ember over to React, which I think was a great move. The React community has so much momentum and so great to work with, and so we've Netlify CMS is really it's a React single page app. We're going to eventually get it to where the whole CMS is a React component. And,
nice.
And then everything that's in it is already a component. All the widgets that you register, they're all components. And so it's a very, very front end way to do things.
Right.
So
I guess the other question I have then is you're talking about it being open source, and it's a single page app, and it's just deployed out there on Netlify like anything else.
Sure.
So is this something I could run on my own? It doesn't have to be run on Netlify?
Yeah, you can run it however you want. It's literally just a JavaScript file that we're bundling with Webpack. You can build it anywhere. You can have your own fork of it that bypasses our backend system and does anything. I mean, again, really, it's just a React UI,
right?
And we just happen to be using it to reach out to these specific APIs to handle things. But I mean, there's really not a lot of limits. If you wanted to run it yourself, I mean, there are people that are running it on S3. If you go into our we've been really intentional about that. We're trying to change the name, actually. We don't want people to think that people come to Netlify, and Netlify is this amazing platform doing all these great things, and there's all these engineers and people that are investing in it. And Netlify CMS, it's not the same thing. And so people see all the quality of Netlify, and they come to Netlify CMS, and it doesn't quite do what they need. And then they go to the support team, and they're like, well, we don't really. And so we're trying to say, look, we support this initiative, but not only do you not have to use Netlify, you can use this thing anywhere. And so in the docs, we have links to different things that people have created to be able to run this on, like I said, Amazon S3 was one of them. I'm trying to think I'm blanking on the others, but you can run it Docker literally container. Anywhere. You can literally anywhere.
Google, what is it? I can't remember, but
Google Cloud, something or other.
Google Cloud Platform.
Sure.
My brain was going to GCP, and I couldn't remember what it stood for. Or Microsoft Azure.
Yeah, exactly. You really could run it anywhere. They can host those static files, and then they can right now the backends we're going for where people are. So GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab are the ones we have now. We have a lot of requests to get. I think Amazon has their own kind of Git provider, and so that's something that we'd like to see hopefully come from the community. And then there was a lot of asks for Microsoft's thing as well, but that's kind of died down.
Azure DevOps.
Yeah, that's died down since they acquired a certain.
Yeah, they acquired GitHub.
so that's not.
I still hear people having angst about it. But they haven't done anything horrible with it yet. So
when I went on to Microsoft a few months ago and saw it, I went on to, I think I was working on an Azure pipeline, and I saw a sign in with GitHub link, and I was like, this is the weirdest thing I have ever seen on the internet. This is so strange. But it's
Microsoft has really embraced open source, so
if somebody had to acquire GitHub, Microsoft.
Yeah.
Like that's, they've kind of proven themselves as much as you could ask them to.
Yeah. Well, and you hear scary surveillance stories about Google or Facebook or some of these others.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a tough rap to beat.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying Microsoft isn't doing it, but I'm not hearing as many scary stories.
We just don't know. So that's better.
Yeah, they're either sneakier or they're not doing it. Anyway.
I'm sure it's okay.
There we go, conspiracy theories on JavaScript Jammer. But yeah, that makes sense. So I'm kind of envisioning, because, I've kind of been an ops guy for a long time. And, and then I was a Ruby developer, and, then I've done a bunch of JavaScript on the front end. And so, just kind of this movement, I like to control the tool chain. And since we're using Netlify CMS on Netlify, I'm just sitting here going, but what if we could put it on our own thing, right? And so,
run it from a server in my basement.
That's right. And so, it was kind of a curiosity for me.
Sure.
So, is there a back end for it then that, just manages the connection to GitHub or whatever? Or?
Yeah, I mean, and what we call a back end, again, this whole thing runs in a JavaScript file in your browser. So when we say, quote unquote back end, we're just talking about a file that is mapping from, GitHub, for example, from their API to a common set of methods that we expect from every backend.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's an Express app or something.
Right. Well, it's not even that. It's really just because you can call to GitHub's API. We need to auth through somewhere.
Oh, I see. So you've just done. Just
going straight
OAuth
from
or
the
something.
browser. Yeah, exactly. And so, Netlify actually provides a freebie auth server that you can use with localhost, and then if you have a Netlify site, then you can register OAuth for that. And so, that takes care of that, because that's always the tricky part is the authentication. But Netlify kind of takes care of that for you, and then you can from there go straight from the browser to GitHub or to Bitbucket and make those API calls and do all that stuff. So that's where everything is happening.
No, that makes sense, because then it just makes the API call, and since you've already got an authentication token with GitHub, then it just works.
Yep, exactly.
So you don't have to play with the back end at all.
No.
That makes a lot of people who are front end people very happy.
It's very empowering. It just works. But again, we're looking at Git, and these Git providers are really implementing Git in their APIs. And I mean, GitHub they're so great to work with their API. There's so much you can do. Can't tell you how many crazy things I've wanted to do. And this is the V3. This isn't even to speak to the work they're doing on their new GraphQL API.
Right.
Even with V3, there's some crazy Git commands that you can pull off through GitHub's API, and it's so super helpful. And then now with the GraphQL API, you can really reduce a ton of those. That's the thing we're seeing now is we're bringing on a new full-time maintainer now named Arez. And before we started hiring for that position, Arez, before we even posted it, he wasn't really trying to get a job or anything, but he just showed up. He rewrote our GitHub backend, which is one of the most difficult to work with areas of the entire code base. He completely rewrote it to work with the GraphQL API, which was something that I wanted to do. Was I don't have time to rewrite this thing. But he did it,
and it works.
Yeah, and he was like, well, I implemented it for my someone that was had a site, and I saw all these requests, and I was like, well, how can we make this better? And so he just did it. So it's using it's in beta, but it's using the GraphQL API, and so now it's using way less requests. So using Git APIs over the web is getting better and more viable, and so yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Nice. I guess the other question I have then is, if people want to contribute to it, right? They see it and they're like, well, I have this special case and I want to add something to Netlify CMS, or maybe they just see something like this, right? And it's like, well, there's this other API that you guys don't take advantage of, and how do people get involved with that?
Yeah, you just hop on GitHub. Well, first of all, netlifycms.org is the site, and so you can go there. We have a page, I believe, that's titled Community, and so that has information about how to, just get in, talk. We have a chatting Gitter that I'm hoping to migrate over to Slack soon, and some other channels. And then beyond that, it's the GitHub repo. You can get on there, look at issues, open issues. If you want something, there's a good chance there's already an issue open.
Right.
And so we really want people to go onto those issues, and if you thumb up the original post for an issue, that is the way, because I can sort by how many reactions that issue got to really get. That's the best metric we have for gauging what everybody really wants. And the next thing we're working on is pretty much based on that metric. So that's the best thing you can do. And then, of course, like you said, if you want to contribute something and maybe it's not that high on our radar, like Amazon Git provider or whatever their Git provider thing is, you could write that and contribute it, and just be ready to respond to whatever we say. And maybe I always feel bad. We have these people that come in and do such awesome work, and we value our contributors, we value everything that they do, and but there's always a little bit of back and forth to make sure we're getting what we need for everyone.
No, that makes sense.
But we're very, very open to contributions.
Yeah, we've had that conversation with several open source maintainers on the shows at various times, is that yes, you made a contribution, yes, it's valuable, and yes, you created a whole bunch of work for us so that we can make sure that it fits well, right? And so, a lot of times we get that caveat where it's like, we may be slow, we may have a bunch of questions, we may do a bunch of validation work on it, and we may not accept it right away because we just don't have the time or bandwidth right now to make sure that it fits, right? That it's in line with what we want. So, that makes sense. But I can also see somebody looking at it and saying, I want to get involved, or I see something here that I want to do, and it could be a bug fix, it could be a spelling mistake, it could be, and things like that are super easy, and and then Sean takes a minute and he looks at it and he goes, that's a spelling mistake, and you accept pull request.
Exactly. So it's we're very open to that. And Netlify CMS is such a great place to learn. We haven't dug much into this. I'd like to get into really mentoring and setting up a community that has a culture of mentoring, because it's a front-end project. You're writing React. There's so many simple issues you can get if you just learn. And so I really want to make sure that we're in the future hopefully being able to take better advantage of that. And so we want to stay open to those pull requests. But the community's been really forgiving with our sometimes taking time to get things in, especially when it's a big pull request kind of thing. So.
Well, into the mentorship point too, I think a lot of people they're like, well, I want to mentor, and they're not really taking into account that they have to do a bunch of work too in order to make the mentorship work, right?
Yes,
and
it's time.
And so, yeah, if you want to get involved, you want to get. I mean, and this is something I tell people anyway. I wrote a book on how to get a job as a developer, and it's
nice.
If you wanted to work at a company like Netlify, I mean, this is a good way to get to know people at Netlify, right?
Sure.
But the other thing is that, if you just want the mentorship, if you want to be involved, go submit these pull requests. Start the dialogue.
Yeah.
And then you'll get feedback. No, this doesn't fit with the project. No, this doesn't fit with the style that we do these things in. You can take the steps then to learn, okay, so what do I need to be doing? What kinds of things do they want me to be working on?
Yeah.
And then you can, as you move up, then it's like, okay, well, I kind of trust you at this level.
Right.
And so then you can learn things at the next level.
Right, absolutely, yeah. And I totally agree. If I found myself without a job right now, I would find where I wanted to work that had some kind of open source culture. Yep. I would hit their open source repos and just knock their socks off. Like that's your best, and it's not guaranteed. They don't owe you anything. It's open source, but that's your best shot.
Well, the thing is then what happens in a lot of cases, especially if they're actively involved in those open source projects, is then boss guy comes in and says, we need another coder guy or coder girl come in here, and knock it out. So then they're going to go, well, this guy Sean, he's contributed 20 pull requests, right? Yeah. And we've accepted 10 of them, and we're working through the other ones, but they look pretty good.
Right. And you're already top of mind. You can't get that in an interview.
And they don't have to train you on how this stuff works. Yep. So it's a win-win, You just showed them that you're less work to hire than somebody else.
Exactly. So,
and that you're super interested. So,
Yep, agreed.
So I guess the last question I have is let's say that I want to set this up for my team, we're going to unplug at least that piece, right, from Netlify.
Sure.
How do you set it up? Like, what goes into it? Do you just pull the library in and just...
That definitely works. The most popular way to implement Netlify CMS, so really you have the CMS that it's just a JavaScript app. It has a config file, and you have to write in so it knows where your files are and what fields to edit and all those kinds of things, what widgets you want to use. The easiest way to start is to use a starter. And so if you go onto our doc site and hit that get started button, I think we're featuring 3 starters right now. We just have 3 links, but we really need to get a whole page of starters because they're out there. But we have a Gatsby starter that's easily our top entry point.
Right.
So there's an 11D starter.
We're using 11D.
Yeah, Andy Bell just made an 11D starter called Hylia that uses Netlify CMS. And I actually put a PR in because I wanted to see how I hadn't worked with 11D with Netlify CMS yet, and so I set up a really cool system with their Nunjux templates where it's reusing. It
works pretty good.
Yeah, it's reusing the Nunjux templates and it's rendering them in the browser, and it's super cool. Starters like that already give you a site that looks decent, has a config that's already set up for the CMS, and then that gives you that starting point to go. So that's definitely what I recommend. Worst case, if it totally doesn't fit, at least now you've played with the CMS in context, and then you kind of know where to go from there. So.
Yeah. Well, we're using it anyway, and I'd like to be able to essentially, start contributing back, right? And so it's, hey, we need this feature for our 11D setup, and then, we can either contribute it back, or we can say, well, here's this little thing that you can side load on it, or whatever, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's those integration points are really the hot area right now that we're going to be focusing on. Is what does it look like to integrate a Gatsby site or an 11D site or a Hex or Hugo or Jekyll, whatever. How do we integrate these static site generators? And because that's where all the pain points really that we're hearing are now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're focusing next.
Yeah. I guess that's another thing that I hadn't really thought about asking, but it seems pretty obvious, is you're writing a CMS that works with, like you said, Gatsby, Jekyll,
whatever, some weird thing you made, whatever.
Yeah, Hugo maybe. I mean,
sure. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
Hugo's a primary. Yeah.
So how do you target all of these different systems? Because in some ways they're all structured kind of the same, and in other ways they do things just a little different.
So it's mostly through ignoring the static site generator, which is what we're now doing the opposite of.
Oh, I gotcha.
So when you ignore the static site generator, you say, I don't care what your static site generator is.
Just tell me where to put everything.
Markdown, YAML, JSON, TOML.
Yeah.
That's it. And then your static site generator can decide what it wants to do with those files.
Right.
So that works really great. But then you have a superpowered static site generator like Gatsby or Gritsum that are doing these crazy things, or Nuxt. We had Sarah Drasner, who's just loves Vue, and so she's working with Nuxt, and I assumed it would just work, and she's like, no, I'm creating a custom Nuxt module, and like 2 weeks later, she's like, yeah, I'm still working on it. I'm like, it's a huge pain, and I'm sure it's because she probably didn't touch it because she was busy with other stuff, but it's a pain point. And so we've gotten to a certain point by technically working with anything by ignoring everything.
Right.
Now we need to say, okay, everyone's using mostly, static site generators A, B, and C, so let's make happy paths there. So we have a Gatsby plugin that we made about a year ago.
I was going to say, are you using plugins to say this one does this and that one does that?
We're getting there. We're getting there. I thought we could avoid it, but we cannot avoid it at all. So we have a Gatsby plugin. So if you go to Gatsby's plugins page, and they're all like automatically sorted by npm downloads, and so you scroll through, the first CMS plugin you see is Contentful, naturally, and then the next CMS plugin you see is Netlify CMS, which is actually surprising to me because there's so many huge CMSs that I'm sure people are using with Gatsby, so maybe they don't need the plugin so much, or they don't, some of them don't have a plugin. I don't know, but a lot of people are using that Gatsby plugin, and I estimate at least half of Netlify CMS sites are probably Gatsby. So we really, and I think that's probably conservative, so we really need to make sure that path works, so we have that, and it might be due in a large part to that Gatsby plugin. So that's kind of patching into their Webpack build and doing horrible things to it that we shouldn't be to build our CMS within theirs. And for anyone that's listening to this that uses Gatsby and Netlify CMS, and you think that last thing wasn't funny because you're experiencing these crazy long builds, we have our new maintainer, Erez, and his first thing I'm putting on his desk when he gets in on Monday is to work on that problem. So that's so those pain points, those integrations are definitely top of mind for us right now.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, right? And again, it just comes down to who's using it, what do they need, where's that pain, right?
100%.
And for a while, it would have been putting the content where it needed to go, or structuring this or structuring that. And now it's okay. Well, I'm a sub case of your case,
right?
Gatsby, and so that's what we need now.
Yeah.
So I can see that.
Totally.
I don't know if I have any other questions for you. I'm assuming you're online somewhere where people can find you.
Yes,
Twitter, GitHub.
I am at Urquhart, my last name, and no one can spell it, but it's ERQUHART, and I'm that on Twitter, on GitHub, and everywhere. So that's the place to find me. So my website sucks, so there's no point giving that out. One day I'll work on it.
Yeah,
that's it.
What nationality is Urquhart?
It is actually Scottish.
Scottish?
And it is there's a Mount castle. I know my family history. There's a castle called Urquhart in Scotland. It's the Scottish name. It normally starts with the letter U, and so it ended up being an E for my family. But it's Scottish in origin. I am not Scottish, so a lot of questions there.
Yeah. Good deal.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming and talking through this with us. Cool. And letting me complain a little bit about some of my issues with Netlify CMS.
I love when people complain to me, Chuck. It's my favorite thing.
Oh, you should be paying me then, huh? Is that what I'm hearing?
This is therapeutic. I love this.
Yeah. Oh, I should be paying you.
Yeah, we'll talk. I'll bill you.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Well, thanks, Sean.
Awesome.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give you full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open source Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code DevChat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code DevChat at Sentry.io.
We are here live at JAMstack Conf in San Francisco. I almost said Salt Lake City. That's where I'm going Friday night. I'm going back home. We're here with Mandy Michael. You just spoke, right?
I did, yeah. I spoke about variable fonts and responsive typography.
Oh, that sounds interesting. Mm-hmm. It's not something I really think about when I'm thinking about making things mobile friendly, right? It's just like cram everything onto the page in the right size so you don't have to scroll left, right?
Actually, one of the things that I talk about with the variable fonts is that, do you know much about variable fonts?
Nope.
Okay, so a variable font it's one font file that has multiple style variations in it. So it might be like all of the weights of a font.
Right.
Can also have all of the width, like condensed or wide. So when you use a variable font, you get these interpolated values, so you can like transition and animate between things.
Okay.
But it also means that when you're making a responsive website, if the viewport is getting smaller, you can just like squish it in a little bit, so you don't have to have things stacking or wrapping where you don't want them to, and you can kind of fit to width.
Oh, nice.
Which is kind of a difficult thing for us to do with normal fonts at the moment, because it's a bit janky and it feels really clunky. But variable fonts take away all the jank and just make it really smooth and feel really natural. So they're really, really awesome when you're creating responsive websites. That was one of the things I talked about. Do you know the CSS is awesome meme where awesome flows out of the box? It's like a classic CSS joke about how CSS is awesome, but it doesn't fit in the box. With variable fonts, you can just like squish that in, so it all fits. It's awesome.
So what makes a font a variable font?
So they're specifically made, like it's an open type specification. They, OTF, TrueType, WOF2, all those formats are still valid, but they're specifically made using this new specification.
Okay.
So whoever makes the font has to make it have the axes and create the interpolation, and then you provide them. So it's not like you can convert a font to a variable font. You actually have to make it that way.
I gotcha. So let's say that I find a variable font that I want to use. Do I just include it on my website the same way I do the other ones?
Yeah. It's totally exactly the same. You still use font face, but the way that you define variations for descriptors like font weight or font stretch, that's slightly different. So at the moment, you would do a different font face block for each different style. With a variable font, you can just define a range. So you can say my font weight is 200 to 900.
Right.
And then you can access all of the values between 200 and 900, including decimal places. And that's how you get the smooth transitions if you want to. So it's really similar, just a slight difference. Google Fonts supports them as well. They've got a new API that they released about a month ago.
Okay.
And that allows you to specify access value groups in variable fonts. So they've got like a handful of fonts you can use. So yeah, it's pretty similar. It doesn't change very much, which I think is a really powerful design of the specification.
Gotcha.
I think Matt said yesterday they want to make developer experience easier so people can focus on the users.
Right.
And I think the way variable fonts has been implemented do that. Like you don't have to worry about the technical implementation.
Right.
You can just focus on how you can use it and make things better for people that are using your sites.
Very cool. So, is that it? Is that all I have to know is just, go find a variable font and then I can squish things in or stretch them out to make them fit?
Yeah, you can do that kind of stuff, but also one of the things that I like to do, because I don't make fonts, I'm not a web typography expert, I just like to play with things. So I like to hook them into different browser sensors like ambient light or device orientation, and then control the fonts based on those inputs.
Oh, I gotcha.
Or scroll or mouse position, because that allows you to create these really engaging interactive experiences. Like one of the demos I showed was using speech recognition, and there's a dragon and he breathes fire, and you say a word like fire and he'll breathe text and it'll say fire, and it'll be like flaming animated text.
Nice.
Or like there's another one that uses the web audio API where it listens to the volume of my voice input and the font will change depending on how loud I am. So because you have that interpolation and you can create those transitions and animations, it means that you can create more interesting experiences and you can fine-tune things or change it based on different environments and inputs. And to me, that is really, really exciting, creating custom interactive experiences based on a user's situation. That's something that we're only really starting to get to do now.
Right.
Another one that I like, do you mind if I tell you some more?
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so there's another one that's the ambient light sensor. So on your phone when you're in a low light environment and it dims.
Right.
You can use the ambient light sensor on your laptop or your phone to change like the weight or style of the font depending on how dark or bright it is. So from a practical perspective, if you're going to try and improve contrast, you can make the weight a bit heavier in low light environments, so it's more legible and more readable.
Oh, nice.
Or, which is what I like to do, you could change the whole mood and experience of your website based on if it was really dark. Maybe like one of my examples, the text like oozes because it's like slime. So you could make like a scary mood and a really fun and bright mood, and you can do like fun and interactive things with like games and storytelling. And I love the idea of being able to change the experience of your site based on specific individual user circumstances. I think that's really fun and really exciting. So those are the kind of things that I do.
No, that's awesome. And I love the idea. We had a conversation a month or two ago on JavaScript Jabber, and we were talking about essentially what is JavaScript, right? One of our panelists, Amy Knight, she basically said, well, JavaScript for me is the way I tell stories. Yeah. And so, this is just another aspect of that, right? Where it's not necessarily then the story of how somebody gets a particular thing done, but it's the feel, it's the flavor of your site.
Yeah, totally. You know, at the moment when we do that stuff, it's usually like illustrations or stuff like that, because doing that with text outside of SVG is pretty much impossible with a standard font. So variable fonts allow us to bring all of that experience and that storytelling in with the actual text, which is often what we're actually using to tell stories. Like all of our sites use text to convey meaning. And we can't do that as effectively at the moment because the fonts are so static and not very dynamic. But now with variable fonts, you can have that and you can create those beautiful experiences with JavaScript, with CSS. I just think that's really fun and really exciting. And I think I said at the end of my talk, we're in a really good place right now with JavaScript and CSS to create really amazing things. And I just want to see people do that, you know, and experiment and have fun and tell good stories and create good experiences, I guess.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I love all the fun examples you gave, but even for the sort of regular business use that, you know, maybe it wouldn't be appropriate to make it drip, right? You know, you can still create the legibility, the readability, the flow of the website and things like that and manage it. You did mention that, you know, you worked on like orientation and things like that. Were those just media queries or?
No. So, you know how phones have like a gyroscope? So I use JavaScript to get the device position. So the device orientation has like 3 different axes. And you can hook into those and then you just pass that data, do a little bit of JavaScript and you can interact with the fonts based on that position.
Do you have to request permission to get that?
Only on iOS 13. So on Android, it works fine. On iOS 13, you have to request permission now, but it's kind of like with webcam or audio. It pops up with a little thing, and you just go, yep. So, I mean, it's kind of a pain because it would be nice if it just kind of worked. And it used to work. When I actually made most of my demos, you didn't need to request permission. And then I made one about a month ago. And when I released it, because I have an older iPhone, it works fine. But anyone who had iOS 13 was like, this doesn't work. I was like, ugh.
Surprise!
I gotta add a button for the iOS 13 people so they can see the effect. So yeah, the security on some of the stuff requires permission. But I think there are ways around that. I wouldn't want people to not experiment and have fun with it just because of that. I think people are pretty used to that with microphones and webcams and stuff like that. It's fun.
Cool. So are there things that you're trying to do with it now that you haven't quite gotten to work?
Yeah, so the web audio stuff, what I really want to do is hook in speech recognition to web audio so that when you speak, it will interpret like the volume or the pitch or the tone so that you can change the speech to text. So instead of just having text that all looks the same, I want it to try and convey some of the intent and volume and meaning behind my words. But combining speech recognition and web audio doesn't work very well. Speech recognition is still really new. Chrome has it. Firefox will have it, I think, at the end of the month. But they don't align, and there's no like audio data from speech recognition, so trying to get them to align is quite tricky. I'm thinking maybe I could use like machine learning or something instead. That's what I'm going to try next, to try and use machine learning to listen to what I'm saying and try and represent my text, speech to text in a more meaningful way, because I think with Google Home and Alexa and people using voice interfaces a lot more, it would be great if you didn't lose all of that, meaning that people push through with their voice. I'd love to be able to represent that. And variable fonts enable that. It's just the technology to detect it isn't really there.
Right. Well, they'll get that figured out on Alexa, and then they're going to think I'm an angry person because I'm always like, shut up.
Well, I mean, maybe you want people to know that you're, you want people to know that you're upset or angry or happy or excited.
No, and my kids play music on it all the time, and I'm always like, after like the 6th time of turning off the noise, right, I'm like...
Well, kid's gonna kid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna have fun with that. But I mean, I think that kind of stuff would be fun. And we get new APIs and stuff all the time. So I just like playing with sensors and input from the user and the environment. I think that's exciting.
And my kids would love that, where we're talking in funny way, right? And have it change the shape of the font or the color of the font and the size of the font. Yeah, they'd sit there all day and just watch it do weird stuff in front of them.
Totally. And that's what I think is fun about it, because, I don't know if you've heard some of the people talk about how the web is dying and it's all about apps, but I feel like it doesn't need to be like that. Sometimes I think we forget about all of the fun things that we can do on the web, and maybe, rather than just creating all of these games and experiences in apps and consoles and stuff, use the web for that fun stuff again, like we did in the early days when we were experimenting. And JavaScript gives us so much cool stuff that we can play with now. I just don't understand why more people aren't creating these fun things.
And I think I've heard the sentiment that the web is dying, but I look at it and I don't know if I agree with that sentiment so much. It's just that we have so many more capabilities now with the devices that we use to connect to it.
Totally.
That it's changing, right? So it's not the same as what we were doing 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. And so, these options and just the availability of what we can do with it, I mean, that's going to continue to grow.
I hope so.
And this is just one aspect of that. Now, one of my favorite things to talk to speakers about is, you had 25 minutes, 30 minutes to give
30
your talk?
minutes. Yeah.
And my experience as a speaker is that I prepare my 30-minute talk, and then I practice it a couple of times, and then I cut 30 minutes out of it so I can make my 30-minute time frame. So what did you drop? What did you have to cut out of your talk?
Mostly detail. So for this version of the talk, I wanted to be a bit more broad and not get deep into specifics of things.
Because, get people out there to try it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a whole... I could talk for a whole 30 minutes just on performance with variable fonts.
Right.
So I cut a whole bunch of stuff on specific things you can do with variable fonts to improve performance. There's one thing that isn't really a thing at the moment, but I think would be really great is, when you load a font on a website and first it loads like a fallback font, like Arial, and then it switches and there's a bit of a jump.
Yeah, everything kind of...
Yeah, it reflows.
Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. Thank you.
I knew what you were going for, totally.
I waved my hands in the air and she translated. Thank you.
It was spectacular. Communication, language, it's amazing. One of the things that I'd love to see is if systems, operating systems, had a variable font that you could control the width and the height and the size of to match your custom font, so that when it's switched in, there was no reflow and no jank. Right. So you'd still see a bit of a switch with the letters, but you wouldn't get repainting or anything like that in the browser because it wouldn't change the space that it's taking up. Right. So that I think would be really cool. A lot of other performance-y based stuff around font display and variable fonts and stuff, but it's not it's very similar to what you do with web fonts at the moment. So I cut that, and I had to cut a couple of demos. I have one with a wizard called Smello, and he's a grumpy wizard. And you do a spell, so you use the speech recognition, and you say a spell, and he'll write text in the sky, and then it's all magic and sparkles drop. But he only does it if it's dark enough. So if it's too bright in the room, he'll be like, nah. It's too light for magic. I'm only going to do this in the dark. But it takes too long to go through the whole process, so I had to cut that. And there's a few other demos that I had to cut. I had to cut the whole detail about the Google Fonts API, because just running through that is a bit tricky. specifics on how I animated some of the effects that I showed. I had to cut some of that down. So it was really very top level stuff, and I didn't go into like specifics on how to build up variable fonts, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So the detail, a little bit of the detail got lost, but I have a website called variablefonts.dev, and a lot of that stuff's on there anyway, so people can check that out if they want to.
I was going to ask if there was a place where people could see the demos, so yeah.
Yeah, well, most of the demos are up on CodePen. There's a couple that I can't because of font licensing, so...
I gotcha.
Because I play a lot with them and I make a bunch of demos, sometimes font foundries will send me a font and I can like make a demo for them and put it in my talks, but because of the licensing issues, like I can't show them publicly. Some of them I will put up on my website because I can restrict it to the domain, but I can't put it on CodePen because you know, it's a more public thing. But yeah, pretty much all of the demos are up on CodePen, so people can go and check them out. There's like a collection called Variable Font Experiments, and they're all in there, and I just keep adding to it over time.
Right.
Yeah, which is fun.
Cool. So if people want to get in touch with you or follow you on the web, is there a good place to do that?
Twitter is probably the best place to get in touch with me. I don't really email or like LinkedIn or any of that kind of stuff. Really, Twitter is where I'm at. My Twitter is unfortunately not Mandy Michael. It's Mandy_Kerr. People can come and find me there, and most of the time I respond to DMs, like if I see them. Otherwise, people can tweet at me. You can also message me on CodePen, but I'm less likely to see that. Twitter's really where it's at for me.
Right.
I love Twitter.
Can you spell that for us?
MANDY _ Kerr, KERR.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm dressed as Batgirl, so I'm really easy to find.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I love Batman. It's legit me dressed as Batgirl on my Twitter profile.
Nice.
Except for on October 31st. On that day, I change it to be normal professional Mandy because it's Halloween and I've got to like, you know...
Your alter ego.
Yeah, my alter ego comes out. So yeah, should be easy to find except on that day.
Good deal.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for coming and talking through this with us. It's really cool. It's something I want to go play with now. So.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Hey folks, this is Charles Max Wood, and I just launched my book, The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. It's up on Amazon. We self-published it. I would love your support. If you want to go check it out, you can find it there, The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. Have a good one. Max out.
Hey folks, I'm your host Charles Max Wood, and we are live at JAMstack Conf in San Francisco. And I'm talking to Tammy Everts. She's the CXO of SpeedCurve, and she's going to be speaking. Are you speaking tomorrow or
tomorrow morning, 11:30?
Right, but I get this access to the speakers, and you know. So anyway, the conference will be over by the time you hear this, so it won't matter. But yeah, Tammy was telling me a little bit about some of the stuff that she's talking about tomorrow with website performance, specifically with JavaScript performance. I've been wondering about this too. I mean, devchat.tv is built on the JAMstack, right? Yeah, I pulled in all these third-party scripts, and then I wonder if it's going to bog it down, or you know what the implications are. And you know, Google gives me a decent speed, so you know, score.
Okay. Oh, so you're using Google Lighthouse scores on your pages? Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I'm watching it, but yeah, I wonder still, you know, because I mean, getting a good Lighthouse score means that I'm doing, you know, it's not going to penalize me on SEO. But I still want a great experience. Hey folks, they're coming to the website, so.
Yeah, I love the Lighthouse scores. I think they're really helpful. We've integrated Lighthouse with SpeedCurve, like so we obviously think they're really helpful, so you can get Lighthouse scores when you use SpeedCurve. The caveat with Lighthouse, though, especially for JavaScript performance, and then especially for third-party JavaScript performance, is it's just giving you little synthetic snapshots of how things are actually performing. So what it's not able to capture for you are all of those moments, and there are definitely moments, especially with third parties, when your JavaScript is failing.
Right.
And you can have a great Lighthouse score and still have chunks of the day, chunks of your week when you still have really unhappy users.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We're sitting here in the glamorous lounge area of the conference.
Yeah, we're out here in the sponsor area, and I put some stickers out so people can pick them up. So.
Awesome. So really user monitoring is kind of like a movie. It's like looking at what all your users are doing. You probably know all this, but for the sake of your listeners.
Yeah, I installed some of that scary third-party JavaScript to watch them, right?
Yeah, that's where you can actually drill down and figure out, okay, well, how are your scripts actually behaving in the wild?
Right. So when you have unhappy users, is it because the JavaScript is impacting the page, or is it because their JavaScript isn't playing nice with somebody else's JavaScript? Or
yeah, it's a good question. So there's a couple of things that are happening with JavaScript, or there's more than a couple of things, but loosely we can put things into two buckets. So you can have JavaScript that is like blocking JavaScript, and everybody knows you're supposed to avoid that and load your JavaScript asynchronously whenever you can, or defer it if possible. And blocking JavaScript is obviously a big problem because your page just won't render and you've got a bit of blocking JS. And people kind of know about that. But then there's this kind of like lesser known, or for some people it's completely unknown thing, which is just that you can have non-blocking JavaScript that still is making your pages really janky because it has a high blocking CPU time. And that's a metric that's kind of new. It's really only been available in kind of the mainstream performance tools in the past little while. Like Google just added it. We added it at SpeedCurve a few months ago, or maybe it was a year ago. Time goes by really fast. And so what it's measuring is just how long it takes for the JavaScript on the page to kind of settle down and stop crashing. So like kind of 50 milliseconds after that point. And then you can have pages that have no blocking CPU. The JavaScript size is constant. The number of scripts on your page is constant. But your blocking CPU, I'm going to draw this in the air because I know people love that in video podcasts. But basically, your blocking CPU time can be this crazy wavy line on a time series chart because it's going up, it's going down, it's performant, it's not performant, all depending on kind of how it's rendering on the page.
I gotcha. So is this something that I'm going to see, or am less likely to see on like my high-end developer machine than maybe on a phone that has just one CPU in it?
Yeah, if you look at, so the nice thing about kind of using synthetic tools or looking at your real user data is with synthetic you can adjust your parameters, you can test across a variety of different devices, and yeah, you're going to see higher blocking CPU times on mobile devices, but you'll still see them on desktop, definitely, especially with third parties.
Interesting. So how do you go about figuring out if you have this problem?
You do some type of testing. So you can use SpeedCurve, you can use other tools to measure this. Google Lighthouse measures it now. You can see when you get your scores, you can see blocking CPU time. You can see metrics like time to interactive or first CPU idle, all of these metrics that kind of are meant to give you a gauge of just, how things are performing in terms of your JavaScript settling down. So Lighthouse does it. We do it at SpeedCurve. So pretty much any synthetic tool, I think people are finally catching up and adding this now that it's being supported by the browsers.
Gotcha. So I guess the other question is are there general rules of thumb that people can just follow to avoid some of these issues in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first rule of thumb is just reduce. It's like the 3 R's of recycling. It's like reduce first. Like make sure you've got make sure that all the JavaScript on your page actually needs to be there, because I look at a lot of waterfalls with what I do on a daily basis, and I have calls with customers where we look at waterfalls together with speaking customers. We look at their waterfalls together, and these are people who are pretty on it, and they'll look at a waterfall on a page and they're like, why do we have that there?
Right.
What is that script even doing? I thought we got rid of that a while ago. And so you still got to, rogue scripts that are just kind of little ghosts that are possibly hurting performance. So that's one. Monitor. Now that you can track things like blocking CPU time, and you can actually ideally kind of graph them alongside other metrics like total JS size or number of scripts on your page, or you can actually take this to the vendors themselves and say, look, I know the size of your script isn't changing, and the number of requests that you're making isn't changing, but you're doing this, I'm doing the wavy line in the air again. You're doing this to my pages, and sometimes vendors just don't know. So I think kind of working with vendors and helping them, the best vendors want to be better. So I think having just a friendly relationship with them and letting them know so that they can look into what the issues are at their end. And then doing things like, you can set performance budgets on on all of your metrics, or at least the ones that matter, and include your CPU metrics there as well.
One other thing that I'm wondering about is because we have people that work on all parts of the stack, right? And so let's say that one of our listeners works for one of these vendors, what kinds of things can they test to make sure that it's not going to cause these problems?
See, that's more of a developer question. So, I couldn't even hazard a guess.
Pull it into a page and make sure that it's not doing these kinds of things.
And actually test it across a variety of devices, a variety of connection types, that sort of thing. Like, don't just kind of do this whole, we're kind of just testing on 2 or 3 different browsers, 2 or 3 different device types. I think it's something that people can easily lose sight of is just how the cohorts of their users, their audience, kind of fall across a lot of different geographies and bandwidth types and things like that.
Makes sense. What exactly does SpeedCurve do in this arena then?
Thanks for asking. So this is my little product pitch. We do synthetic and real user monitoring. So our customers use our tools to measure a variety of metrics. So kind of do the synthetic testing that I was talking about earlier, where you kind of configure different test scenarios, test environments, and then you gather your data over time, so you can see if you're getting if you're making things better or worse. Right. And kind of monitor trends, and including specifically tracking individual third parties, which is a really helpful thing to be able to do. Kind of see who your poorest performers are, set performance budgets on them, so that you get alerted whenever your metrics go out of bounds for any of those poor performers. And then on the real user monitoring side, is actually just look at the entire breadth of your users and see how they're experiencing your site. And then the kind of cool thing that you can do with RUM, because we're also capturing things like bounce rate, or you can add things like your conversion rate data. You can actually do really interesting mashups in your charts, where you can look at things like the impact of the total JavaScript or the total blocking CPU time on your page, or any of these other metrics on conversions and on bounce rate. And so you can see you can create really, really interesting correlation charts, which I'll be showing in my talk tomorrow.
Very cool. So if people want to try out SpeedCurve, is there a place they should be going to do that? Yeah,
we offer a free 30-day trial. They can just go to our website, speedcurve.com, and there's a big free trial button up in the top right corner, just like every other SaaS vendor out there, so pretty easy to find. If they have any questions at all, they can actually email me directly, tammy@speedcurve.com. Awesome.
If people want to follow you online, are you on Twitter or anywhere else too?
Yep, I'm on Twitter @TamEverts, TAMEVERTS. Is a good place to find me, and then I also write on the SpeedCurve blog, which is available on our site.
Very cool. Well, thanks for coming and talking to me for a few minutes.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I'll encourage people to go check out the talk. I'm assuming they're recording them, and if they're not, then sorry you missed out.
I think they are being recorded.
I think so too.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, well, thanks for meeting you.
We're shaking hands, everybody.
There we go. Yeah, visually dictate. And then I lean back.
It's over.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.